CGIAR's independent advisory and evaluation service. Our business in the independent advisory and evaluation service relates to independent evaluation, to process, performance, and impact evaluation that bolsters learning and accountability across our integrated partnership. So as I mentioned, we work on process and performance evaluation. We support SPIA, which is the Standing Panel on Impact Assessment. And likewise, we're the Secretariat of the Independent Science for Development Council, which is providing an ex-ante view of quality assurance when it comes to programs, organizations, and it complements the internal processes that are happening at the level of CGIAR centers by MELIA staff, so monitoring, evaluation, learning, and impact assessment staff who work in centers, and at the level of the system organization, where the program coordination unit and the portfolio performance unit are likewise working on MELIA topics. So evaluations are tools for governing tools for managers, for partners, and ultimately for the people that the CGIAR exists to serve. So I'm very honored to be able to introduce you to the participants and the conveners of the session today. From the Global Development Team and the Director General of the International Rice Research Institute, we have Dr. Yvonne Pinto. Thanks for joining, Yvonne. Also, the Chair of the Independent Science for Development Council, Professor Holger Meinke. Our introductory remarks, and after doing a quick manual Minty exercise to get the feel of the room and who's here with us, we will then hand over to our colleague and collaborator, Solomon Adebayo, who works with the Program Coordination Unit and also with IITA as a monitoring and evaluation expert. And IAES, the Independent Advisory and Evaluation Service, is very happy to have two external experts with us today. Amy Jurslid, who is been instrumental in the application of evaluability assessment and the guideline on evaluability assessment in the context of CGIAR, and Gaia Golota, who is an evaluation analyst, who is an expert in data systems and GIS. I would also like to mention our colleague, Svetlana Negrostova. Svetlana is the lead of the independent evaluation function in the remote and couldn't be with us today. So let me pause there and ask, Amy, would you like to run the Minty now? Or the show of...
We will do a... Thank you. We have just a few questions, and I think to indicate our affiliation, where we come from, and just to give a sense of that. How many of us in the room are from CGIAR? Majority, vast majority, yes. How many UN officials do we have here today? None, right? Government? NGO? Your government? Oh. NGO? Academic? Okay. Great, well, welcome. The second question, and whoever would like to just turn on their mic and make an offering. How would you describe what an evaluability assessment is? Just to venture a guess or based on your experience? How would you describe it? This isn't an easy question, by the way. Would anyone? Yes, thank you.
Thank you, Amy. Well, to be honest, this is the first time I hear this word. Given my background, where we do impact evaluation on intervention or innovation, the first thing that pops into my mind is some intervention or innovation are naturally easier to evaluate quantitatively, whereas some are more on the gray area, it's harder to evaluate. When I say hard, I'm thinking from a data and methodology perspective. So that was what comes into my mind when I see your question.
Right, thank you. Would anyone else? Yes, please.
Yes, my name is Rachel Zuzu. So for me, evaluability assessment if you can be evaluated. Yes, at the beginning of the project, you have a program and can be really evaluated.
Yeah, thank you.
Ability assessment. I think the kind of work I do, I've never given it that term, so it's good to add to my vocabulary.
Yeah.
But for us, we are in the business of looking at how well positioned we are to be able to assess climate change adaptation. And to add to the example on the project, we've also done, for example, assessments of how adaptation policies, including national adaptation plans, and the elements included there and how well they can enable, whether it's governments, be able to assess how well that policy has been implemented. And there are particular criteria that we look at to then see what are the gaps and entry points.
Thank you so much. The third question have you ever been involved in an evaluability assessment? A show of hands, yes? Not too many, just about 4 or 5 of us in the room. So I take it's a resounding no for the vast majority of us. Yeah, that's not unexpected. And the fourth question, what value should an evaluability assessment provide?
Almost it. Well,
I think for the 3 of you who provided some idea about what it is, I think by extension, the value is there, isn't it?
Yes, maybe just a follow-up.
Yeah.
The value in my view would be, let's say, an index that provides to the team what can possibly be used to evaluate the project, given the evaluability assessment results. So I would say some recommendation. Sorry, I hear echo. Okay. But it's also nice to hear my own echo. It's it's fun to hear. So I was thinking the value could be some recommendation to the team in terms of what could be carried out for the evaluation.
Yes, the value for the evaluability assessment is really to know the value of the project that you will implement, and I help to shape up a little bit the program so that when it is implemented, you come back at the beginning, because you do this before you start implementing the project to see if it really fits within maybe it's relevant, coherent, all those evaluation criteria. So as the program is being evaluated, you have the midterm review. Don't just wait until the end. So you can come back to the results of the evaluation still fit within the context that the project was set. So it brings really value to the project right at the beginning before you start implementing. Yeah.
Yes. Okay.
Because once you've done the evaluability assessment, the system needs to change. You need to collect different types of indicators, and you would
aside just the process, I think it provides kind of standard. So it standardizes the process on how the evaluation will be carried out, or even criteria that will guide, the evaluation with assessment.
That's wonderful. Thank you. I'll hand it back to Allison then.
I think I like the manual Minty. It's a lot more sociable. Very nice, very nicely done. And speaking of value and value of evaluation and M&E processes, again, I'd like to ask Yvonne to share her thoughts about this topic with us. Thank you, Yvonne.
Thank you and good afternoon, everybody. So there are three things that I would be really keen to convey to you. The first is my thanks for the invitation from Alison and Svetlana, who reached out to me, and maybe to just say to you that I am a self-taught evaluator, which has its pitfalls. But on the one hand, I hope to demonstrate to you that the value of learning about it cannot be underestimated before you do it. So what I'll say to you is that, I think most of my area of background has been in the innovation space, innovation from the outset of discovery all the way to population-based uptake or even sustained adoption. So I've learned a lot along that journey. In the coming months is the 25 to 2030 CGIAR research portfolio. It reflects all of our collective efforts, but we need to be very, very deliberate in focus transformative role that monitoring, evaluation and learning plays, because I think the tremendous value for us is really the emphasis on learning, how to create programs that are effective and how to understand how these programs actually interact with people's lives. And I'll come back to that at the end of the point I'd like to make. So I'm a tremendous supporter of these efforts because I think they can be game-changing in building our understanding. So we need to ensure that evaluability of the lays the foundation for having robust monitoring, evaluation, and learning. In one of the evaluation standards and principles in the CGIAR that is vital to enabling a culture of results, we must pursue that. So MEL is not really simply a process of answering yes or no. It goes into a systematic understanding of the change processes that to be able to unearth the lessons that facilitate learning. And I can't really overemphasize that. I think IAEE, for example, the role of MEL has been really evident in achieving impacts of scale of one of our projects, which is in the Asian megadelta, number of different CG initiatives, and it's focused on creating resilient, inclusive, and productive river deltas. So with MEL being central to the project design and delivery, has driven our learning and our adaptive management, allowing us to refine and tailor our approaches to meet the needs of our partners in both Bangladesh, in Cambodia, Vietnam. The evaluability assessment conducted by us with the Asian Megadeltas Initiative strengthened the MEL system and aligned it with the CGIAR evaluation framework and enabled in us a culture of reflection and continuous improvement. So the impacts of actually doing it and doing it well and having an unbiased is embedded in Western pedagogical approaches and Western philosophy. And we must try and ask ourselves when we do this work, who is the impact for? And are we able to really capture what that means? Now, when we talk of our work, we talk about simply adoption, and we think adoption is the end result. But actually, adoption is a means to an end. And we fail to capture what that end result is. And more than that, we fail to capture what the drivers of that adoption are, and to what extent those drivers enable us to create impact, whether it's at scale or whether it's at a household level. And we need to be careful. Our perception of what impact should be. So I want to just impress upon you, I've had the privilege of working with people like Bagele Chulisa, she's a professor, looking at the indigenization of evaluation methods and methodologies and approaches. And we need to think about how we combine West in cultures. I also want to just flag indeed our assumptions and estimations of where we are going to head. So we need to be careful that we develop the right skills to do this and to do it well. We need to guard against funders directing that evaluation plan unless they undertake it themselves in an independent way. Questions without due regard for context and whom the impact is for. And we need to ensure that we don't suggest quantitative data is more important than qualitative. So I think some of these things are really critically important. When I think of myself in the context of evaluation, I think of myself as a broker and a translator of information and knowledge that helps me to translate to a scientist who is an innovator what the end user may wish to deliver through the innovation that is being. So the other thing I just want to illustrate with that is that this is a virtuous circle. And so evaluation must feed back into the design of what we do. I think sometimes we think the evaluation report is the end of the game. Having done it, we're done and dusted, but actually that's just the beginning. So why are these divides in our perceptions important? Just a couple of points on that. Science and evaluation, designers and end users, donors and beneficiaries suggest that results are very different. And so we need to be able to capture both of those perspectives or those paradigms in those comparisons. There are trade-offs within methodologies, qualitative and quantitative. There is a lack of synthesis of combining different knowledge systems, disciplines and research. And so I standardize our approaches too much. Frameworks are wonderful, and I think the frameworks within the CGIAR are very wonderful, but we need to actually make intelligent choices in the approaches that we have. Just a couple of examples as to why it's important to be careful. For example, the log frame as an example of how evaluation tools of how evaluation tools may reinforce relations of power and control. It can often reinforce unequal power relations between donors and the recipients of that aid. So we need to play a very responsible role in how we do this. It's often things like gender, context, and cultural insensitivity that could be the difference between adoption and the lack of adoption. And so we need to be able to understand those things both in designing our approach and being able to reflect the quality of that approach. I think that it's really important for us to just be sensitive to the fact that when we design our methodologies and our approaches, we are thinking about what impact really means for the end user, and we're taking the time to understand how that is articulated and demonstrated within the context of their lives. Because I think sometimes we are try and create evaluations that are simply about the return on investment. And you have to ask yourself, is the trade-off the return on investment, or is the trade-off the impact in the context and in the understanding and language of the end user? So I want to leave you with that. These are big things. They have a heavy weight attached to them. And I just want to say that your role in evaluation is really an important one, and that it should be something that you are guided by in the right way, and that you confidently undertake in order to help us understand how we might make this a better world for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Yvonne. Very inspiring words, I think, for so many of us sitting around the table who work in this area. Very touching. And you talked about the wonderful frameworks in CGIAR. One of the frameworks that the CGIAR uses a great deal in terms of assurance is the Quality of Research for Development frame of reference. I'd like to again introduce Professor Holger Meinke, talk about the role of ISDC and the role of independent assurance and how the CG has been using that particular frame of reference in the work of ISDC. Over to you, Holger.
Thank you very much, Alison. And I'd like to start by thanking Alison and Svetlana for inviting me to this session, because I'm not an evaluator. I have no formal background in evaluation. However, I appreciate the importance of it, particularly after listening to Yvonne. Just a quick show of hands. Who is aware of what the ISDC does? Okay, good. I just don't want to burden you with too much information that you already know, but clearly there are quite a few people here who are not fully aware of the ISDC. Okay, the ISDC, the Independent Science for Development Council, is an 8-person independent science advisory council, and we provide strategic advice on science strategy, science quality, and the science portfolio to the System Council. And the System Council of the CGIAR, as most of you will know, is a multilateral body of funders and regional representatives of the CGIAR. So we provide that sort of ex-ante quality assurance for the research portfolio. So, and that's different to the external evaluation, which occurs after or during the research that is taking place. And for any multilateral organization, independent assurance and evaluation mandates are absolutely essential for robust and healthy governance. And Yvonne pointed that out very eloquently just before. So the ISDC refers to past evaluative evidence as part of our core mandated activities. That is the proposal assessment for the CGIAR research portfolio. The portfolio that was officially launched in the plenary sessions on Monday has been reviewed by the ISDC, has also asked for the ISDC to review the inception reports of the programs and the accelerators. And that is a process that's currently ongoing. And some of you are probably involved in that. And we will receive those inception reports at the end of June for our assessment. It's also important to understand that the CG proposals, in contrast to most other organizations, are not competitive grant proposals. They are expected to form a synergistic and interconnected research portfolio that delivers on the mission of the organization. So the ISDC's independent external review for the leadership, but also for the System Council, and it provides confidence to their money in the right type of science. The success of agri-food research relies very heavily on how the research is designed and then how it is practiced. And questions that are asked are, for instance, can and will it work in the real world? Is it really
together. And to, I believe that then results in very usable, very practical and pertinent sorts of actions going forward. So the idea then is not just to produce reports to sit on the shelf, but to apply them and to use them. I'd like to invite Allison. I think she has a good sense of how things might go forward then from those reports.
Amy's answer was great, and I would add to that, we're excited about the timing of the reporting, because moving into 2026 into pause and reflect for programs and accelerators, I hope that's still the right name for that process, but a super process that the CG has to build learning into every year of the portfolio. Those reports would be available for the pause and reflect that each of the programs and accelerators undertake. And that's the ideal moment when there are those discussions, important discussions. Is there a tweak we want to make in our theory of change? And really that culture of learning is supported by those processes and supported by having evidence that comes from evaluability assessments and other evidence into those pause and reflect. That's all I would add to what Amy has said.
To say this is where it's super interested for us in PCU, okay? This is where we take the baton from you to be able to say, because the idea is that outcome of developability is coming up with recommendations on what to do. And so that gives us a window of what kind of program support we can provide to those programs. And so we are going to, I mean, that's to me, the real basic involvement of PCU in all this process, to the extent that since we are going to be interfacing with the programs, what are the things that comes out from there? The end of it is that they are evaluable, you know, down the line. And these are the things that they are watching out. So what kind of support is required by them, through us, and all other people that are required to be brought in to make them ensure that that is deliverable. And that's one of the very first steps is that they reflect on that. And reflecting on that, maybe might be saying we need capacity, because we understand. For example, you know, in the things we are doing, in some of the things that we are currently doing, we saw that there is need for clarity around research questions, for example. So we brought in an expert, explain to us what exactly is research question, so that everybody comes to terms and define it in the way that is acceptable. So that kind of exercise we hope to continue to do, you know, while we understood that it is independent and people can run with whatever they find as outcome from those evaluability results. But there are key things that we feel we can interject. We are going to be there for them.
Okay, next question. Yes, my name is Rachel Zozo. I work for IAES EA. I coordinate the monitoring and evaluation functions of the TAT program, and I'm also the IAES country rep for Kenya. So I have a lot of interest in the evaluation, and I think the first time I came into really build interest in evaluation is with Yvonne when she was working with us in TAT. She really helped me to unpack the theory of change of TAT. It was very complex. And at a point, if I knew by then what evaluability assessments could be helpful at that time, I think it would have really be very helpful for the program to know the trajectory we are taking. So this is something that I see the value that evaluability assessment brings. So I'm also happy to learn that you have been participating in the design of these programs and accelerators. So I'm just curious to know if, are there some of these program areas and accelerators that can be evaluated, and what triggers or what are the changes, recommendation you can provide? Because I had time to look at all of them, the theories of change. I see they're very complex, and I'm wondering if we need to simplify them, how can that be done? And I'm happy to learn that evaluability assessment was there right from the design. And also for Yvonne, you talked about something very interesting about the end user. So I'm thinking talking about the practicality of evaluation in real life, because for the realist, if you apply the realist approach in your evaluation, you understand that even if people are subject to the same conditions, the result will not be the same. So what do you think about generalizability of the result so that we help to understand better evaluation in specific context and not just generalize the results? Yeah, thanks.
Thank you for your questions. I also, in looking through the theories of change of across the whole portfolio, also have some concerns as well. You know, as during our inception period, we're studying now and asking questions and getting a sense. It wasn't any different really from the regional integrative initiatives as well. It was equally complex. I think, you know, from an evaluability perspective, I think the question becomes what can be evaluated, not you know, in terms of not saying, well, this cannot be evaluated at all, so we're not going to evaluate it. You know, I think it becomes more of an exercise of what might an evaluation look like? What aspects of that program logic are clear enough with clarity around the data points and an ability to access that and collect over time that would then also serve a purpose. And that purpose would be linked to what is pertinent to learn and what do we need to learn. And again, that goes to stakeholder interests and values and the accountability word, you know, in terms of what kind of, what do we need to be able to say to both the donors as well as the other stakeholders who are participating in this intervention. So I think it's a multifaceted sort of question where there's lots of room there to really explore what and how, as opposed to coming at a absolute sort of this is unevaluable. So I think that's the exercise. Given the complexity of these programs and accelerators, I think that's the exercise we'll be undertaking and thinking about. Thank you.
We have time for another question. Sorry, go ahead, please.
It's always a pleasure to work with you, Rachel. You know that. We've had some good times. I guess that there's a couple of reflections that I have. So the creation of a theory of change and coming at it from a very practical standpoint is usually created with multiple stakeholders. It is not usually created in isolation because the understanding of the assumptions is different by different stakeholders. And so if these assessments are for a compliance purpose, that's fine. But really what should happen beyond them is that the programs actually create their theories of change with stakeholders with whom they are working and enable those to become practical plans. And here's where I think there is a conflation in our language. And we need to all have a common understanding. The theories of change are important for monitoring the projects and understanding the logic, because really we are unable to measure impact in the lifetime of many of these projects. And we would not choose to evaluate all of them because that is a very expensive undertaking. So really the value lies in being able to create systems of monitoring the assumptions, things like the inputs, the activities, the outputs, the outcomes towards the impacts, but not measuring impact itself. Ideally, evaluation is more about impact, and it is more about, often it's more about addressing the complexity and the trade-offs in the system. So we need to be careful not to conflate those two things. I think learning is also very important, and I think there should be continuous reflection on the theories of change and the logic that underpins what you're doing and the course corrections in order to be able to have confidence that you're moving in the right direction. But let me also just add a couple of things. There is a word in evaluation called positionality, and that does mean that we come with a real bias to what we think should be happening. Actually, we need to sort of control some of that, and we need to design our evaluation plans or design our monitoring systems to be able to test these assumptions in the program. And the reason that that's really important is that those assumptions are different for different people. And I'd like to give you an example, if you wouldn't mind, to help illustrate that. I once had the fortune of evaluating a program that was really in the realms of dairy development. It was 5 countries, and the premise of the program was to create chilling plants, and around those chilling plants where farmers would deposit their milk, there would be a series of services offered. And to cut a really long story short, over several years in several countries, there was a commonality about why the program was not working in the way that it had been constructed. And that was because a very simple factor had occurred. The processors who were buying milk from the chilling plants were paying a lower price than the informal market externally. And it was a really simple principle. It still fulfilled the objectives of poverty alleviation, but it wasn't the right model in the context. And so the complexity is really, really important to address. And there are a number of ways in which that could be addressed. For example, could the processor pay more? Are there particular services the farmers were offered that would have been more valuable to them rather than the services that were offered? Are there opportunities to diversify, opportunities to sell to informal and formal? Can we capture that evidence, and can that be part of our thinking? So we need to be really, really very careful to use the right tools in the right way. And then I think the last thing I would say is that we are an organization that is going to go through quite a big transition in light of our external environment. That places more emphasis on us being able to understand how we add value. You could argue, one could argue, not everybody would agree with this, that we're not simply a science-based organization anymore. The money that is funding us is development finance. The expectation is not that we do great science alone. It's that the science contributes to change. And so we need to work in an interdisciplinary way to understand those elements. And I know you and I have been through that process, and I'm very confident we continue to go through that process. But it's really important to use the support that you have, but not to lose sight of the fact that actually what we're seeking to do, mainly in our purpose-driven lives, is to create that change for the end user, and to understand what are the elements that might impede or enhance their ability to use the things we do to improve their welfare and well-being. I hope that's helpful.
Thank you, all of you, for joining the side event. I'll give the floor. Sorry. Sorry that I wasn't here since the beginning. I have a conflict of identity still, so I was in the other room. I was like, no, I'm not in research anymore. I need to go there. So I have this new life in working with monitoring, reporting tools, and you were talking a lot, so I missed your amazing presentation, but I was here to present Solomon as well, to see, and the presentation was really great. Thank you. But I have a question, because we were talking a lot about the end users, and this is my work. Actually, my role is a user experience researcher. And we have this all PRMS family of tools that we know about it, and we have theory of change too as well. So, I would like to hear from all of you, because I was thinking about this question actually before when I was listening to your presentation. And with your answer, like how we should facilitate, how to facilitate all of that, to capture this information. And today we have tool for everything, like we have our agenda here, we have our supermarket list here, so how can we transform all of that, like the availability assessment into a tool, because today we have this super complex theory of change tool. It's not just reading, the tool itself is also complex. So how can we better bring that into this family of tools, and the future of that to be able to reach what the new portfolio is bringing, and exactly what you said, that we are not a research. I was a research before, so I'm really in peace with this change, but not the researcher. That we are not a research organization anymore, so we are doing development with research. Our base is research to deliver impact. So I would like to hear from you. Thank you.
That's a big question. Well, maybe I could make one statement, and it's something that we heard in a plenary yesterday. The construction of theories of change can be very complex, or they can be less complex. It depends on what the purpose is for the theory of change. Is it to enable everybody to see the same picture and have an idea of the same assumptions, or is it for somebody who is measuring to have the detail of which tool, which template, which indicator reference sheet, how often, how frequent, how much does it cost, right? Different tools for different purposes. But I think it's really important that we do that work. Now, when you mention your role in looking at the end user, the first question that springs to my mind is, to what extent are the views of the end user encompassed in the theory of change? And that's very useful for the theory of change. But remember, we have a long distance between outcome and impact. They're very good to guide us as to the right pathways of impact, but they may not tell us exactly what's going on in the lives of the end user. That's probably better positioned in the evaluation space. It's probably better positioned in an independent evaluation space. So we are not biasing the questions that we are posing as to what we would like to be able to see in the report. So I think the segments of it that we should be responsible for doing, and others we should work with others to do. But I think it's really important that we understand what I might call the value chain of MELIA. And we confuse in our language this notion of impact assessment and MEL. And I could give you an example. In my institution, most of the scientists don't understand the distinction between the two things. And the methodologies involved are very, very distinct. So we need to be careful that people like me who are self-taught are not just doing what they think is right, but that quality assurance of what they're doing is tempered by people who really do evaluations. I've spent 15 years doing evaluations for 400 institutions, mainly in the innovation space. I had the privilege of working with the African Development Bank and Rachel and IITA to craft the MEL system. But how many people did we have in the workshop? We had 17 or 16 value chains represented in that workshop. And they then went on to test their assumptions with their end users. And actually the results that you have are super impressive for anyone to see. I once had the privilege of sharing those results in a system council meeting. So we just have to be very thoughtful. It's not simply about our last piece in the puzzle. We must ensure deliberately those evaluability assessments are given to programs to implement theories of change that are then reflected upon with end users and refined and reviewed on an annual basis. And that we capacitate people to actually do the data collection at a reasonable level. So the difference between the picture and the practical tool are really important to bridge. I'm sorry that was really long-winded.
Sorry, it was like because you were bringing PCU, no, and there is a gap in the tools. So I don't know if you can answer focusing on that, no, like the tools, but also like the role of PCU in these tools, no, because you are working straight with like PCU and IAES.
So I think there are a couple of ways by which might not necessarily mean PCU is really doing that, but it's like part of the design of the programs, which we have seen before in some of the initiatives in terms of bringing the voices. I mean, a lot of colleagues are here who have implemented initiatives before. The idea of a users participating had been incorporated in one way or the other, and that's what they do in the adaptive management process. I mean, of course, that can be taken further down. How intense and how qualitative are the participation of those stakeholders we are talking about in reflecting, but contextually, it's assumed to be there. But some of the arguments that we see in some of the products that come of that shows that deeper engagement might be required. So that's one way of actually feeling users in terms of their input into revolving and evolving what the program becomes like. Now, the other thing that also might be a challenge in terms of continuously including the voice of the users is that some of the tools that we have, and probably maybe that's where your interest might be in, needs to be reviewed as well. I mean, and coming to the question that one of the response from the needs that people want to see the feedback from users as part of the element that we capture in the tools. So there are a couple of things that can be done. One, if we are going to be honest and ready to take that kind of feedback, we need to look at some of the data collecting tools that we have and see how we can reflect that. That's one part. But it is also going to be something that the programs need to reflect and know how to adapt the use of that. Second is that in a broader perspective of how we're designing our reporting tool, yes, you talked about the fact that they are quantitative and are qualitative. I mean, of course, if you are talking about qualitative, we have in the tool that we have an element, I mean, surprising that we put it there because we know that we want people to respond not only quantitative, and we know when you're talking about qualitative, you're already getting to the users and asking to get feedback. But what surprised you is that that element of that tool that requests people to populate response around qualitative is not completed, it's omitted. It was not that there is no appetite from my own point to say they want to collect a user experience through that approach. But it's not that the tool is not made provision for it, but the programs themselves did not, I mean, see that as an issue. So perhaps if this is a very strong need, perhaps we need to continue to engage with the programs to see where it is there. You could have actually collected things like that. I mean, that's another point. But another thing that we also need to reflect is in the indicators that we have ourselves. Some of those indicators that we define, which is with the CG indicators, we don't even put in issues around the need for voices. For example, there are qualitative indicators that would definitely make you to want to take that step, but it's not in our framework. And so if it's not there, then the programs are not thinking about it, and so the voice is still going to be lost. I just stop there.
Anyone else? We can.
Yes. We all have a very strong appetite for evaluability assessments, I see. It's 10 after the hour, so I think we'll close and hopefully continue the interesting discussion at our leisure and going into the future for those of you working within CGIAR. I think the cooperation and I think across many corners. Those of you who are not within CGIAR, we would also love to hear from you if you decide to apply evaluability assessments in your work.